All right, now let's get analysis on all legal matters we are currently tracking for you today. We are now joined via Zoom by Elton Hart from the University of Johannesburg's Law Clinic. Elton, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, there's a couple of legal matters currently dominating the news, but let's start with the suspended Western Cape Judge, President John Hlophe. All eyes now, of course, firmly on President Cyril Ramaphosa on how he'll now act on the recommendations by the JSC to suspend him. Your thoughts?
Now, obviously, what the JSC does, it does its work, and it actually in April 2021, it found Judge Hlophe guilty of gross misconduct in that he tried to influence some of the Constitutional Court judges. Now, the president, who is President Cyril Ramaphosa, he is not bound by the decision of the JSC. He can still exercise his discretion, so he can look at it and say, you've made this finding against the Judge President of the Western Cape High Court, but as a president, the head of the executive, I still have a discretion to decide, am I going to suspend or not? Because here we know that Judge President Hlophe has already appealed the judgment of the High Court. So there is still matters that's pending before a higher court currently on his suspension. So I would think the president, he may suspend, but it's a discretion. People should know that it's in the discretion. He's not bound by the decision of the JSC.
Now, the Black Lawyers Association obviously saying that, you know, it does respect the JSC's decision and it respects its discretion. But of course, this has huge implications for the judiciary, as, you know, Judge Hlophe could become the first judge in South African history to be impeached or removed from office.
Obviously, that is indeed so, that the Black Lawyers Association will have a concern. But also, I think there was issues pertaining to procedural flaws in the process and also the composition of the JSC, how the JSC was, the makeup of the JSC that actually found him guilty of misconduct. And the things that happened before the April 2021 decision. So that in itself, and obviously it will be history in the making, that and for the Black Lawyers, it's that it's a black judge that is also being impeached. But there's a further obstacle. Obviously, if impeachment proceedings is started, obviously in the National Assembly, you'll need to have a majority vote to say that the judge is impeachable. So if you don't get like 50+1 in the National Assembly, you won't impeach him. So if he gets sufficient support within the National Assembly, I don't think he will be impeached. And that is another political battle that will play out. And as we know that there is factions within the ANC, but also knowing the EFF, they always trying to be radical. So one needs to check and see if they would go, because I think maybe a party like the DA will go for the impeachment proceedings against Judge Hlophe. They will support it, but I don't know if the EFF will vote with them in this instance to get a black judge impeached. So that is the political dynamics that plays into the law as well, that we should not forget. I'm not saying we should focus a lot on it, but we should not forget that that can also play a role.
Of course, let's move on now to other news that are making headlines, you know, across this week. Of course, this is a big one and a positive one. Your reaction to the official appointment of Justice Mandisa Maya as Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa?
I think this is long overdue. I think Justice Maya has showed over the years, over and over, as a deputy of the SCA, as the head of the SCA, that she's a capable person. And I don't want to say capable woman, she's a capable person, because people tend to, when it comes to females, try and say, but as a woman, will you be, they must be seen as equals. And I think for years she's been capable, she's been running the SCA with efficiency. And I was actually one that was actually of the view, I support that she was supposed to be appointed back then as the Chief Justice of this country. So I put my neck on the block, or my head on the block, and say, I want to see Justice Maya as the next Chief Justice coming in the next year and a half, because she has the credentials to lead the top court in the country.
Well, of course, some people will say your wish will be granted, you know, given that that role will be available in a couple of years' time. But let's talk about what her immediate priorities will be, you know, when she assumes that role in September as deputy.
Obviously, as the deputy, when she assumes the role, obviously she she's well familiar with the running of the higher courts in South Africa, so I don't think it will be something new. It will most probably be she wakes up in a different city on any given morning. That is in Johannesburg. But I think she will not have, obviously, what people will look at is like how she will influence the transformation of the justice system and the judiciary, in essence, so that more and more females is taking up the leadership positions. And I would actually urge and back her in that, so that we can actually transform the judiciary in to say that because there's more female lawyers in the country than males, but why is the males the dominant when it comes to the judiciary? So that for me is something that I think as a DCJ, she needs to sort of have drive. And I sincerely hope and pray that she also gets the position of CJ, which comes vacant in 18 months or so, that she gets it. But I know that's another interview process that will need to be undergone. And I think she's a more than capable woman to do the job, and person in essence. She's a more than capable person to do the job, and not referring to her gender specifically.
Elton, let's switch gears now and get your analysis on this. You know, suspended public protector Adv Mkhwebane is, of course, back in court. Her legal representative, Advocate Hlophe, was saying that her suspension is unconstitutional, you know, because it happened before the process to remove her started in Parliament. Speak to us about the significance of this.
Unati, yeah, it's now like interpretation. If one looks at interpretation, one asks ourselves the question, when did the proceedings start? Did the proceedings started now when they started leaded evidence in the Section 194 inquiry or committee? Or was it when the National Assembly took a decision to establish that committee to actually do an inquiry or hold an inquiry into the fitness of Advocate Mkhwebane to hold office? So it's a matter of interpretation. When did the proceedings start? Because if you look at the Constitution says the President may suspend the head of a Chapter 9 institution after the start of proceedings. And proceedings and processes can be words that used here or there. So it's synonyms for each other. So I say, if we determine and say proceedings was started back then when they said we'll establish a Section 194 committee to do the inquiry, that's when the process has started, then it means that her suspension, it looks on the cards right. If we say the proceedings only started when the committee started, then it means that the hearing started only in July. She was suspended on the 9th of June, 2022. Then it means that that suspension could not have happened because the proceedings has not started. And that's how we interpret the start of the proceedings. So I think one needs to look at, if we can say and determine what's the start of the proceedings, then we'll get our answer very quickly.
And I mean, that's probably why, you know, this is also confusing because of these two parallel cases. But talk to us about this court case. Do you think it will wrap up today because it was set aside for 2 days?
I think it will wrap up. I think that the judges sitting on the bench today, the three judges, they will most probably run into overtime to actually get the matter finalized, because it's also difficult to get parties to court all the time. So I think it will finalize. And obviously one needs to look at, and I know there's an argument as to what type of application it is, and Advocate Mpofu on behalf of Advocate Mkhwebane say he's bringing this application looking at Section 172 and 173 of the Constitution, which says the conduct of the President was unconstitutional and hence the court must find in their favor. But that will come down again to the earlier comment that I made, when did proceedings start? So that is what it is, and obviously the various representatives of Speaker of Parliament, the President, all of them, they hold a different view, but I think the court will sit a little bit later today to actually finalize the actual arguments and get it sorted out.
Elton, thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there for now. Elton Hart from the University of Johannesburg's Law Clinic.